welcome to Mercy's Corner. Thank you so much for accepting us in your home.
It's our honor to have you here, and what a beautiful, beautiful name for a podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. The purpose of this podcast is to bring awareness. And I know of you guys for the past, I could say 2 years. And I've seen you very active in the board meeting. But before we talk about that, you can introduce yourself.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say peace and blessings. We wish that to all of our individuals. My name is Brother Lyle Muhammad. I have the honor of serving as the executive director of the Circle of Brotherhood. And we have been in existence since 2014. And just as an individual, have been a humanitarian, an activist, a youth development, human development specialist, along with a community development specialist for about 40 years.
40 years?
Yes.
Wow, what a blessing. What a blessing to do that. You mentioned it was founded in 2014 or 2013?
2014.
How did they let you to do the Circle of Brotherhood?
Right. So actually, going back to 2012, a lot of people in Miami may be familiar with a crime show called First 48.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So a lot of people don't know that show actually started in Miami.
I did.
And now it's syndicated all over the country. But there was a detective who had been doing homicide investigations, Detective Ford at the time. I think he recently retired as a deputy chief somewhere in North Miami, I believe. But he had been doing homicide investigations for 27 years.
Wow.
So just imagine doing homicide investigations in Little Haiti and Liberty City and Little Havana for 27 years. And there was a rash of murders that took place. He couldn't take it anymore. So he went to then sitting Commissioner Michelle Spence Jones and said, look, I don't know what to do. She said, I don't know what to do either, but I know who to call. And Commissioner Michelle Spence Jones called a meeting, about 5 of us, meeting pretty much for the first time. And when we heard what Detective Ford had to present, we made a promise to ourselves that day that we would never allow the things that separate us get in the way of what we can do together. And that gave the genesis and birth to the Circle of Brotherhood.
Oh, wow. What's the mission for the Circle of Brotherhood?
So first of all, our motto is Black men solving our own community problems. If you just kind of look over at the last 50 years or so, the so-called disappearing Black man has been a media phenomenon, whether it be because of incarceration, whether it be because of not being in homes. So one of the very first things that we naturally gravitated doing was to be involved, positively involved in solving our own community problems. And that was the very first community problem that we were introduced to, was that of gun violence. And so since that inception, we say now we're known all the way from the outhouse to the White House because of the great work and impact we've been able to make in gun violence intervention and prevention work. But also when it comes down to human and youth transformation and development, be it through mentoring and also economic development. You know, but our overall goal is to help our communities be decent places to live and thrive.
That's beautiful. That's very beautiful that you said that. I know you guys posted I think a few days ago that the grants have stopped. Has that affected your organization?
Absolutely, in a tremendous way. To speak specifically to it, some folk might remember a few months back when the White House administration, I think this was in January, as a matter of fact, around the 27th or so, put out a mandate to freeze all nonprofit spending. That mandate was quickly stopped by court injunctions, and there's been a back and forth since then. And so just to give a little backdrop, back in 2023, we were one of only 8 organizations across the entire country that received a $2 million grant from the Department of Justice to do our violence intervention and prevention work here under the guise of what's known as CBI. That's community-based violence intervention, which is very different than from a public safety approach that only deals with police. This is community-based like we are. And so last Tuesday, we were one of 365 organizations across the country that received by email a grant termination letter immediately effective as of that time. That email came at 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday evening, and the termination letter froze for us $608,000 and some change in terms of that we're not able to draw down or use or to continue our work. And so we're in a situation now where we have to make some drastic decisions in terms of how we're going to move forward and if we're going to be able to maintain the momentum of crime reduction, which has been tremendously impactful where we serve.
Has the impact of violence have increased in Miami-Dade, or have you noticed it's gone a little bit down?
So we have been, of course, akin to doing this work in Miami-Dade on the ground since 2018 directly. But since we received that grant to be able to fully implement our program in 2023, so firsthand account, the demographics of what our staffs have collected and the reports that we have, and for the first time there was a national research group that saw that the work that we were doing is literally driving down crime across the county. I give credit to the police chief of the city of Miami, Manny Morales, for who 2 years in a row clearly recognized that there was a more than 23 to 30% drop in crime. And he was kind enough to say, from what I understand, the only police officer in the country that went on record. He went on record in the Herald to say that it wasn't just policing, it's through the great work like organizations like us, the Circle of Brotherhood.
Oh, wow. Because I've seen you guys in the board meetings, and I see you guys with so much love and passion trying to speak to your commissioner, trying to speak to the mayor. Do you think they have failed you guys, listening to you guys?
So I'll say two things. Gun violence and violence intervention and prevention, unfortunately, in Miami-Dade County, it's a political football. People are attempting to stand and be recognized rather than recognizing what really could be done here.
Right.
We're a national model. Just a few weeks ago, we had over 150 community-based violence intervention leaders come to Miami and bear witness to the work.
That's where we did our article.
Okay, excellent, right. And so I mention that because, to be quite honest, the only county funds that we have received to do any kind of violence intervention work is a program that was really implemented by the previous administration because of our advocacy, but it's called the Group Violence Initiative. But that really isn't the full scope of our work. But since we've been able to implement the full scope of our work, we've brought more than $6 to $7 million into Miami-Dade County, not just through the Circle of Brotherhood, but through the advocacy of other groups that are doing work just like we're doing. So I don't expect any financial commitments from government at this time.
Because you think they have turned their backs on you?
I think that could be said of some, of course, but I think even deeper than that, no one has ever really given us the proper platform that we can actually educate people on the impact that we have in the work that we do. As a matter of fact, at that very last commission meeting, when our folk were speaking about the work, one of the things our great mayor said, who's very familiar with the work that we do and is always speaking highly of it, she said she did not realize that we had that much breadth and depth of work in service. So here we are, a national model, having to get funding from outside because of gun violence being a political football.
That's very interesting because, I've seen you guys going to the board meetings and you guys go on a big group and you guys coordinate because they only give us a minute, so all of you finish the sentence. And I still feel it's not enough that you're getting help.
You know, one of the saddest things about that day for me, which was January 26th, I believe, is I went back and listened to the testimony that was provided.
I did too.
By those beautiful men and women that work for this great organization.
I did too.
And not one single commissioner had anything to say about that testimony. And I will say this for the record as well, too. The way we were treated.
Yes.
The way we were treated.
That's why when I decided to do the Mercy Corner and associate with Miami-Dade today, I always thought about you guys. Because since back 2 years ago, I've been following you. I've been seeing the work, and I feel like you're doing this by yourself. So I feel like this, it's a little podcast, but I'm sure it's going to grow. I know it's going to impact people, and now a lot of people are going to start hearing you more. And I did see that I was actually there in that board meeting. And that's when I was like, no, we need to help them. We need to help them because you guys were treated really bad.
You know, we've actually, over 30 days ago, submitted an inquiry that we sent to all the commissioners, to the mayor, and to the Miami-Dade attorney, with about 7 inquiries about how we were treated. We not only delivered it to email and to their chief of staffs, we hand-delivered it to each and every last one of their offices. And to this date, we've had a 0 response. 0. We haven't even been able to get the response and acknowledgement that it was received.
I believe you. I believe you because we joined a campaign last year, and it was very mind-blowing what's happening in Miami for me, that I've been born and raised in Miami. I feel politicians don't care. I don't know if you know about what happened in Sweetwater with the trailers. It's private property. They knew they had to leave. It's 900 families. They know eventually they had to leave. One day they had to leave, but it was the way that they're treated. Mm-hmm. So that day of the board meeting, it impacted me the way that you guys were.
Wow. You know, and I want to say 2 things. First of all, there is nothing ever small about a heart and a mind. Remember, every great idea, every great movement is because of individuals like you.
Thank you.
And so don't ever think of that small.
Thank you.
and I need to say this as well, too, because you reminded me of these cuts. When people hear, mind you, this is 365 organizations. Now, here's the cruelty in it for me. Mm-hmm. It's not just that the work of individuals who are decreasing and preventing gun violence from taking place, but it was cut in our communities nearly 30 days before summer.
Right.
That to me is akin to conspiracy, to murder and mayhem, to cut off violence intervention and prevention dollars 30 days before school.
As the Circle of Brotherhood has grown so much, I've known it's also like Los Angeles has the Circle of Brotherhood. Do you think it's a good idea to get all the leaders and go to Washington to see you guys?
Wow. It's so funny that you mentioned that because we've been blessed to be seen as a part of the national leadership body in this CVI movement. And so I have been on calls the whole past week since Tuesday when these terminations took place. So there's some national coordination going on. Mm-hmm. And so May 7th is going to be a massive day of action. There are individuals who are going to Washington, D.C. on that day, but there are also individuals like ourselves that'll be holding right here a mass rally and call to action.
Well, let us know. We'll be here to support.
Indeed.
I do have a couple questions. You actually made me cry with your kind words. That's why you were a leader, because with your words, you impact the world. And again, I've seen you in board meetings, and you always got my attention. I've seen you talk, and I was like, you're made for this. You're made for this. I have a couple questions, too. Can anybody be a Circle of Brotherhood, or does it have to be someone that had a past history? Because I've heard that rumor. Okay. I've heard that the Circle of Brotherhoods were ex-gang members, and you made them to believe in God and change, and you made this with faith, and that's why your circle has gone bigger.
So the reality is, and people need to study the Circle of Brotherhood a little bit more closer, particularly in terms of movements, particularly in terms of Black America, because to be honest, the only thing that has disrupted our movements has been disunity. So the beautiful thing about the circle of brotherhood is we like to say we're from the streets to the suites, which means that you have individuals from the circle of brotherhood who have lived a life of street life and maybe even crime and incarceration, but you have others that have never even seen the back of a police car. We have brothers in the circle of brotherhood. Some are Muslim, some are Christian, some claim other things, but we have a motto that says it's one brother, one hood, and there's no big I's and no little U's. And so if you lined us all up together and just looked at us, you wouldn't be able to tell who was the one who ran $1 million company from the one who used to take from somebody who ran $1 million company.
Right. That's amazing.
But we do say this, I think it's important to say. Pastor Jeffrey Mack, who was at that initial meeting with me that I told you about, for a Christian and a Muslim to come together and work together, he initially called a lot of flack, but he understood the principle that, we're not about religion, but we are spiritual, and so nothing that we have is of ourselves, but it is a model that could be duplicated across the country.
Right. In your recent program, Transforming Lives, we saw in the case of Mr. William Dean, what challenges do you perceive man faces when trying to into society?
Would that be one of our folk coming from the entry?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that really makes us a little bit different and unique is that we're very, very holistic in our approach. If you think about it, most crime fighting initiatives, most don't go back to jail initiatives, they become a revolving door. And we see evolving people. And so we have a full-fledged re-entry team that has a holistic approach. So he'll get everything from a job coach, so he'll get the proper information, he'll get the proper training, he'll get the proper discipline, and he'll also get the proper support of individuals that made the same kind of transition that he did. And if all those things aren't around there, it's too many pitfalls for someone who is trying to reintegrate themselves into society to go through to be able to do it successfully without that well-rounded. And we've been so successful that at Everglades Correctional Institute, we even have been granted a re-entry dorm.
Oh wow! Congrats. When I heard of Circle Brotherhood, I think you guys were like more than 20. Right now, how many members do you have?
So the funny thing about that is when people ask that question, our standard answer is that those who know don't tell, and those who don't know can't.
Right.
So I think it's safe to say, just like any organization, you have a core group of members that are actively involved in community service. We have a staff now of more than 50 individuals doing the violence intervention and wellness work full time, although with these recent cuts, that's in jeopardy. We may even have to lay off, but we don't plan on doing that. No. We want people to come and find out at that call to action what we're going to be calling on people to do. But just to think that we have 50 individuals that are doing this kind of work full time and hundreds of men that belong to the organization.
As you consider in the streets as a peacemaker, do you also help homeless in your community, or is it just gun violence?
So when we developed our holistic approach, one of the departments that was important for us was to be dealing with not only public housing, but housing issues. I'll give credit to Mayor Francis Suarez, who was the first one to vie for our organization receiving not just ARPA dollars, but $1 million of the city's ARPA dollars, because he initially came across our story in the work that we were doing with residents that were in transition in public housing. So if it's not a holistic approach, then it's not going to work. So we work not only with public housing residents, we help to connect people. But I'll have to be honest with you, the housing crisis is the greatest gap to be filled nationwide. Because if we had individuals in facilities where they can receive the care that they need, and at the same time rehabilitate, and at the same time receive the mobility that they need to become independent on their own, it becomes a different ballgame. People have to come home and they're going back into some of the same environments that caused them to go astray in the first place.
Right. In your recent press conference that you had here, that you had leaders from around the world coming here, you talked about that your staff, your Circle Brotherhood, will be helping the streets with gun violence. That they'll be standing in the corners, checking if the violence will be controlled with them being like. Why don't you have police officers helping you? And are you guys doing the corners, checking your neighborhood with weapons, or just by yourselves?
So a couple of things to that. I want to make this statement first because I think it's important.
Okay.
One of the things that we have been able to do, we have been able to create an industry for the employment of those type of services.
Right.
See, because generally speaking, people look at our conditions in the community and they want us to volunteer our way out of it. So you can't volunteer. You have to have people who work these jobs full time. So I wanted to say that first.
Okay.
Okay.
So they are employees.
Absolutely.
But they're not with weapons.
No, okay. We don't do
You
our
don't
work with
work-
weapons.
okay.
But I want to go back to another statement you
Okay.
made in reference to the police.
Okay.
So it should be noted that, number one, we train police officers.
Oh, you do.
As a matter of fact, the trainings have been so effective for both the Miami County, now sheriff, formerly police, and the city of Miami, that their cadets don't graduate from the academy until they come to our one-day training.
Okay.
So we have an excellent rapport, but you have to understand when it comes to community violence intervention work, our folk are community-based. And there's a big gap between building the trust of somebody who's community-based and then working side by side with the police. We do have a coexistence, if I may say that, where we understand that they understand that there's some things that we do that they can't do, but they also understand on and vice versa, tickets that will, you know. So the most important thing is that if you look at gun violence in urban America, it really only is a 50-year phenomenon. And policing is not going to stop the type of violence and atrocities that we see in urban America. It's going to be individuals that are equipped with a different kind of training, a different kind of mindset. So a militaristic or policing approach to community development, that's community enforcement.
Right.
And our people
So
don't.
you do a lot of service for the community in a sense. You do events for young people to come, teenagers. Do you offer counseling for them too?
All of the above. As a matter of fact, we have a whole team of youth success coaches that not only work where our young people are in groups, whether they're in foster care group homes or whether they're in particular schools or programs or whether they're hosting them here at our own site. Just to give you an idea how valuable that is, we recently have taken responsibility for helping to transform Buena Vista, as you know, Lincoln Fields, and spring break was just a couple of weeks ago. Now, normally when spring break is out, you have literally hundreds of children that literally have nothing to do. So our youth success coaches planned a whole week of activities for them. So they did everything from going swimming in neighborhoods that they never thought they'd be able to walk safely in, to having field days and movie days and educational events. And so think about what that did just in that space for those young people. So again, we take a holistic approach to that, and we have regular meetings here on Tuesday nights where wellness circles are held for both young girls and women and for men and boys.
I was going to ask you that. If there's women involved with the Circle Brotherhood, because they say it's only for men, but there is women also involved. Well, your sister.
So here's the funny things we like to say to that. You know, there used to be a little commercial that says silly rabbit tricks are for kids.
Yeah.
So let's just be realistic for a minute. How can any individual be working with men and boys and not be working with women and girls and be effective? You know, it's so interesting that I had an honor to attend a ceremony yesterday for Girl Power. One of our great partners and organizations who just completed a project, a statewide project, releasing data on our girls at Promise. And there has to be a holistic approach. And so we have women on staff that have specialties that not only deal with just working with women, but they have skill sets and specialties that other individuals don't have as well as too. And so, but there is healing space needed in our communities where women and girls need to be with women and girls, and men and boys need to be with men and boys. So if those conditions are right, when we come together, there's a healthier respect for our well-being in each other.
Talking about the political world again, your commissioner from this area, he just changed the street names to songs, rap songs. But when we asked him if he could do a little bit more for the community, he was a little bit unprofessional, saying, how do you feel about him changing the street names to rap lyrics?
So, to be quite honest, I really haven't found that conversation worth the space in my head and my mind. You know, and I'm very careful where I spend time in my mind.
And your energy.
You know, and we have so many pressing issues. So my remedy is just work. So we work cheerfully and we fear not.
Talking about the political world again, your commissioner from this area, he just changed the street names to songs, rap songs. But when we asked him if he could do a little bit more for the community, he was a little bit unprofessional, saying, how do you feel about him changing the street names to rap lyrics?
So, to be quite honest, I really haven't found that conversation worth the space in my head and my mind. You know, and I'm very careful where I spend time in my mind.
And your energy.
You know, and we have so many pressing issues. So my remedy is just work. So we work cheerfully and we fear not. And we'll continue to work. I will say this to all politicians. America's unraveling rather quickly right now. In so many different facets, in so many different ways. And so many of the policies that are coming down from Washington are actually imploding in some of their very own communities of support. It's not a time to play with people. So I would warn this commissioner and all commissioners to understand there's a spiritual factor involved in how you handle and how you treat people. But the beautiful thing for us is no weapon formed against the righteous will prosper. I just hope they find themselves on the right side.
Correct. That's the issue that we're having as I started doing the podcast. I've noticed that some politicians, not all of them, some of them, let's say a majority of them, cares for them and their needs and not the community. You know, and that's why it's very important that we did this. Like I said, it's little, but it's going to get big. That's right. But it's just to bring knowledge to people, the community, what's really going on. Because you ask a lot of people, who's the mayor? They're like, I don't know. Who's your commissioner? I don't know. So I wanted to do this podcast to bring awareness. And I'm super grateful that you let us come to your home because you have impacted me. In 2 years I've been going to the board meetings. I always see you guys. I'm very shy, so I always want to say hi. But you guys go so powerful, so I'm like, I cannot break that energy. But it's very rewarding what you're seeing. And I know God has bigger plans for you because I see it, I feel it. You know, and I feel, yes, we're going through stuff with the grants, but a lot of stuff is going to happen to you. You have a lot of light, my friend.
Well, it takes light to see light, and it takes light to want others to be light.
Amen.
And so, may the work that we do speak for itself.
And it does.
You know.
It does. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Humbled by your words too.
I wanted for you to tell me, you could repeat what you just said before we started with the article. You told me that we did an article and it...
Got it. Okay. So I wanted to thank you all for the article that you did when we covered the press conference at Buena Vista launching our community safety service. Because you all did that article, you almost forced the hand of the major newspapers to pick it up, and it even made it all the way up to the Tampa Tribune.
Wow.
So grateful and grateful. And don't ever think that there's a such thing as small press.
Thank you.